Hello everyone, and I love chess, but I hate playing against pawn to d4. I find the positions to be slow, boring, and make me hate myself, until recently when I started playing knight to f6 and pawn g6, the king's Indian defense, which in contrast gives me fun attacking games, which I love. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, become a member to support me and vote on future opening videos, and without further ado, let's get started. So, pawn to c4 is their most common move here, and what goes into the official King's Indian, simply taking more central space. But what is important to mention is that they can play this, they can play that, this, they can play about 400 different things here, actually 400 million different things. But the good thing is that you can play your first 5 or so moves the exact same every single time. Ready? That being pawn to g6, opening up your bishop to go to g7 to fianchetto, at which point you'd be able to castle. Knight to c3, their most common move here, just controlling central squares, developing their knight. We're going to go bishop to g7 here. They can now play pawn to e4, taking central space, and they do have a threat here, that being pawn to e5, attacking our knight, which can actually get pretty scary. So pawn to d6 here, very simply prevent that. And after knight to f3, once again just developing their knight out, we're simply going to castle. Now, move 5. We already have a very good start here. Our king is safe. We have 2 pieces out in central control. And this is the main branching point of the King's Indian. But I'll take a look at bishop to e2 first. The Orthodox Variation, this is their most common and definitely one of their best variations. And in all King's Indian defenses, you have 2 pawn breaks, that being pawn to e5 and pawn to c5. In various positions, you'll play one or the other. Here, it's best to go e5. Attack in the center right away, and they have 3 very big options. I'll label each of them with chapters. That being, with this pressure that is now in the center when we are attacking them, they can either push up to d5, which generally is going to favor us. They can try to capture here, maybe win a pawn or go into some endgame line, or they can simply ignore everything that's going on here and just try to castle, which is their most common option. So I'll take a look at that first. And traditional King's Indian play would go something like knight b to d7 here. However, I have found trading in the center right away actually gives you really good results because of a very nice line. When you capture here, white has to take back here. Knight is their only good move. You can now go rook to e8 here. Attack the pawn on e4. Once again, they only have one good move here, that being pawn to f3, which is also a very typical move in the King's Indian, defending like this. However, by playing f3, they now open up this diagonal with their king and their knight, so we're going to play c6 here. And this move has 2 ideas. One of them is more obvious. We're going to go queen to b6 here. Potentially get some sort of pin and attack b2, which can be very deadly in a lot of positions. However, the other idea, which pretty much everybody seems to miss, is that we're going to play pawn to d5, smash open the center, which actually is going to work very, very, very well for us. And here they have 2 main moves. King to h1, stepping out of this diagonal is their best try right away. However, bishop to e3 here is very common, which is not good because now we play d5, and it is really strong because we are literally looking straight at their bishop with our rook. If they ever capture like this, that is a free bishop, and you are already completely winning. So, instead of that, their best move is to capture with their pawn. Otherwise, we're just going to take and start ravaging open their entire game. They pretty much have to capture to fight back here. And normally you would think, oh, just take back the pawn, right? However, you have opportunity to play a very fun move here. Knight takes on d5. Taking advantage of this even more, if they take your knight, you can simply go ahead and just take their bishop now, and you are better here because you have so much pressure in the center. Queen b6, a lot of deadly ideas, and they're going to get murdered here one way or another. White has a very tight position, and because of that, they're going to be doing very well if they capture. Instead, they have two better options here. One, when they see this, they can simply try to just back their bishop up to f2 and just try to say, I'm just going to back up, you can have your fun in the center, but I'm going to get a very safe and solid game. But we are not going to let them. We're going to go knight to f4 here, because now that the bishop's out of the way, this actually is a big threat. And by playing knight to f4, the knight gain to f4 is once again a very typical idea you will see in the King's Indian, most often through h5 like this. However, this is more atypical, but still it's very good. You're putting a lot of pressure on their bishop, and also various queen g5 ideas can get really deadly. For example, bishop c4, most common move here is trying to move their bishop out. Queen g5 here. And white has to be very careful not to lose this game really quickly. You're attacking g3. How do they defend it? G3, like playing up their pawn, is really their only good option. By the way, g2 is what I meant instead. And here, knight to h3, attacking their king, defended by your bishop. King g2 is their only good move here, and you're simply going to be winning after takes, bishop takes d4, queen takes back, and now rook to d8 here. And look at that. Where can the king, or where can the queen go? It is actually trapped. Will we get this trapped? Probably not, but it's something nice to keep in mind. And one very fun way that white can lose, yeah, their queen is completely trapped. You can check everything, nowhere to go. So instead of that, what can they try? Instead of bishop f2, the better option from here would be to capture back with their knight instead, at which point you have a nice following line here. You're going to capture back with your pawn, and faced with threats of this and such like that, bishop b5, moving out, attacking your rook, is their best try here to counterattack and such, at which point you can go bishop d7 here, simply block, they can take. We'll simply take back with the queen, not too much to think about. They only have one good move here, which is queen to b3. Queen to d3 is very common, and it looks like not that different, just moving their queen up, just defending everybody in the center. But we now win here with captures. If they take back, then knight to c6, and their knight is actually getting trapped in the center, because after rook a to d1, trying to defend, rook comes over a to d8, they're actually going to be straight up losing their knight, no way for them to defend, and they cannot capture, because then that is a free queen, and you're going to end up winning a rook at the end of the day, and you would be completely winning there. So back here, instead of queen to d3, queen to b3 is really their only good move here. This you definitely don't have to know, but it's nice to include. And from here, development is easy. You can just go knight to c6. This trade in center is just good for you. You now have your center defended with another pawn. Your bishop is sprawling. You potentially have ideas of going rook to b8, or actually you should definitely go rook to b8, because you also team up with your bishop on that pawn. Lot of dangerous positions for them, and you are doing great in so many of these lines. And that is why bishop to e3 in general is a kind of a bad variation for them. Even though the engine thinks it's about equal, you're going to be winning in a load of those lines. But the better move here, king to h1, stepping out from any of this diagonal nonsense. And from here, you want to go knight b to d7. You can't go d5 quite yet. You'll probably still go it in some variations, but here you want to wait for a little bit. And what can they try here? They have three good moves with their bishop, those being bishop g5, bishop f4, and bishop e3 once again. Let's take a look at bishop e3 first, like the other line, and here it's once again not good. At d5 you can go here now because of that same idea. Bishop e3 is just very bad, and after like captures here, or captures with this pawn, you can take back once again with your knight actually, and it's a very similar line. Captures. There is a slight difference because your knight is on d7. They can try a slightly trickier knight b5 and going for getting their knight in like this, which is kind of dangerous for you, but the easiest way to combat this is to simply capture. They can play knight to d6, attack like this, and you have a bit of a surprising move here. Simply rook to f8. Looks really stupid. Why would you go like this? But the idea is after they capture back, you can now play knight to e5, because your queen is still defended by your rook, and after captures and captures, this is simply a better endgame for you. You can then go bishop e6, put your rook on the other open file, and because of your super powerful bishop here, you're going to be dominating in so many of these lines. You're simply going to be doing just better there. Let's take a look at bishop to f4, trying to put pressure on the d6 pawn, which is under attack. However, you have a super fun way of playing here, knight to h5. Looks surprising, but I can almost guarantee you they're going to fall into a big trap here. You attack their bishop, and anybody's just going to think, oh, well, they made a mistake. That is a free pawn. But you now play queen to f6. Now, this is starting to look worrying for them. You're attacking their bishop and their knight in the center. How will they defend? They have two tries here. One, they can try to back their knight up to b3 like so. Take advantage of now that their queen opens up to see the bishop and defends. But you now have a very nice way of playing here. Knight to f4 like in the other line. And although white is up a pawn here and they have a seemingly good bishop, this is actually not that great for them. Because after c5 here, gluing their bishop in, but while this bishop looks very good, it doesn't attack anything, and so in reality, it's honestly not doing that much. And from here, you can just ignore everything going on in the center and just go a5. It looks really funny, but this expanse on the queen side, they can't do anything against. a4 is their best try to just trying to go against us, and now you can start rotating your knight to the center, knight to e5. You can potentially get your bishop into the game, and white's king is starting to look a little lacking, and you're moving your knights in. This can get pretty dangerous. If you really do need to trade their bishop off, then a bishop to f8 is always a good option, and they can't do anything against it, and you're doing very, very well in all of those lines. They do have one other try here, which is after queen to f6. Instead of knight b3, they can try e5 here to defend the bishop like this, attack the queen, and block out everything. But here, you have a very nice knight takes e5, which looks like a mistake because knight to e4 now, and a lot of our queen squares are being taken away. But simply back your queen up to d8, and after c5 here, once again, you can play that same move, rotate your knight to the center, knight to f4, and the exact lines here start to get pretty iffy. However, you then want to play pawn to f5 here. Just taking control in the center, your knight can always back up to d5. You're attacking their knight in the center. Once again, their bishop isn't actually doing too much in the center here. Potential bishop f8 in the future to trade it off, and that would be really good for you. The only thing you might have to worry about is if they play a check. Simply slide your king over to h8, and there is absolutely nothing here. After they back their knight up, you can then move your knight in to d3 like so. And will you get this line ever? No, but you can start seeing the ideas of playing f5, rotating your knights into the king's side, which is the most important part. If you get those ideas down, you're going to be an absolute monster at the king's Indian. And also here, you open up your bishop to attack their knight, which is also a good bonus. So, bishop to f4, because of that deadly knight to h5 line, overall is actually pretty bad for them. Their best move here is bishop g5, trying to pin our knight to our queen. And from here, your game is actually pretty simple. You want to go pawn to h6 here, just attack their bishop. Nobody's going to trade. They're going to back right up to h4, trying to keep this tension here. In a lot of lines, you will go g5, and that is one of the best lines from the engine. However, personally here, I prefer to play a5. Simply take some space on the king side first. You don't need to rush right away. And here, you have a very, very fun position. 60% of games here go queen to d2, which just looks like any other normal move, but this is now losing. You have a very nice tactic. Knight takes e4. And this idea of knight takes e4, you will see in quite a few of these variations, because the idea is you open up one against their knight in the center, and you attack their queen, but two, you now open up against their bishop, and you're basically just winning here. If they capture back your knight, simply take their bishop, and you're just doing better. They can capture one pawn, but here you then have a very nice way to win. Bishop e5. and that is deadly. A fork of checkmate and their knight. That'll be a very fun trap to get. F4, only way to prevent, and you can just capture. You're up a piece. The other try might be to capture your knight, or sorry, your queen first instead, but after takes, rook slides over to d1, captures, 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 captures. At the end of the day, you are up a piece and you are completely winning. And like I said, that losing move there, queen d2, 60% of games. So even at very high elos, which I mean, nobody at low elo is going to get this position, you can still see how this is extremely deadly. And I will show their absolute best line here for sake of being thorough. Knight drops back to c2 is their best move. And from here, you can now play that move g5. Really, in the King's Indian, you're going to get a lot of these h5, g5, f5s because your plan is to eventually go on a big kingside attack, which I will elaborate more in other positions. So g5, h5, a lot of these pawn moves on the king side, do not get scared, do not get hesitant, be very happy to play them because you're going to get very fun and gigantic attacks. And from here, after bishop g3, attacking d6 once again, simply knight e5 here, launching your knight into the center, and surprisingly, everything is extremely solid, and their position is actually kind of lackluster here. After like queen d2, you can play that same rotation, knight to h5, bishop backs up to f2, and knight to f4 here. Potentially you'll trade, potentially move your knights in the center, potentially you're going to go h5 in g4 and just go on a just completely completely insane line on the king side, and you can see how those positions can get absolutely insane. Alright, so that was a lot, but that was the castles variation from the Orthodox after pawn to e5. What else can they try here? They can try two other things. They can try to capture and go to an endgame line, or d5. d5, despite being very common, is honestly quite, I don't want to say bad, but definitely not one of their stronger options here. After d5, the big problem with d5 is that although they shut down the center and they take control of some important squares, they create a gigantic hole on c5, of which that is perfect for this knight. You want to rotate it there, either via a6 like that, or to d7 and like that instead. So the move you want to play here is a5, because the only way they can really prevent that is by playing pawn to b4 and expanding on the queen side, which a5 simply prevent that. Just a good move. And from here, if they just castle right away, if they don't put up any fight, knight to a6, and you're going to go knight to c5, put a ton of pressure on their central e4 pawn, and you are going to be riding very, very well in just all of these variations. The only thing that might look a bit scary is bishop e3, and it looks like that idea is just straight up completely prevented. If I were black here, I would probably delay my plan. I'd probably go knight to h5 first and start trying to push f5 in typical King's Indian attack style. And going for that, the engine suggests just knight c5 anyways, because the idea is after, if they do trade here, after captures and captures, if they take on e5 the knight, we have that typical idea there, like we saw a minute ago, knight takes e4, we open up against their knight, and they're not winning here at all. And if they don't do that instead, then we have extremely strong control of d4, which is impossible to get away. And once again, extremely strong control of b4, which once again is basically impossible to remove for them. So if you're a little bit crazy, you can go for that. The more challenging line here will be something like bishop g5, trying to pin our knight to our queen, which is annoying because f5 is what we want to play in so many King's Indian positions, but with this, well, that is now obviously prevented because we'd have to move our knight, which we cannot do now. So instead here, we want to go h6, attack their bishop. If they back up, well then goody for us, but if they go bishop to h4, keep the pin. In a lot of these positions, you can go g5, engine. This is the engine's top move here is g5, but in my opinion, this is getting too insane even for me. White can now sack here, and if you want to go for this, you absolutely can. You absolutely should, but personally, I prefer the line here, just delaying this for a second and going knight to a6 first. This is now, once again, a big threat. But now white here basically has no way to prevent this, so knight dropping back to d2 is their best move, just preemptively defending pawn to e4, and here you can go ahead and move in right away, but what I prefer is because they have no way to stop this, you don't need to rush, I would rather just go queen to e8 here. Very simply, moving your queen out of the way of the pin. You can then go ahead after like white castles here. You can drop your knight back. Usually you go to h5, but here you definitely cannot because of their queen and bishop. So here, knight dropping back to h7 looks odd, but getting f5 is really that important. So it is a very good move here. And where can this go from here? A3, controlling b4, but doesn't really change the position that much, so we're going to continue with the plan. From here, there are many different ways you can conduct this. The engine's favorite is to first play h5 here. That way, white has no way of playing bishop g4 and doing any trades here. We keep all the pieces on the board. And after f3 here, by the way, if they play rook to b1, just like trying to go here, you then have a very nice way of playing g5, bishop backs up, and h4, which is a secondary, even more hidden idea, and it looks completely insane. But, I mean, you're going to be winning their bishop. They have no way of getting rid of their, or getting their bishop to safety. So that is why f3 here is played to get that safe square and also keep their pawns in center defended. And from here, you can go ahead and move your bishop out to d7. It's important to note in that the majority of these King's India defenses, the bishop is simply going to stay home on c8 or just move slightly up to d7. Most positions, it doesn't really have a role on a lot of these squares, so you just want to keep it at its home base. And I have a fun line for you here. White can go pawn to b3. And you have a very odd way of playing here, but it is once again a nice idea I want to keep in mind. Bishop h6. The idea, you're going to rotate your bishop into e3 and then backing up to c5. One, to attack this pawn because that is fun, but after they defend it with queen to c1 here, you can now play f5. That very important strike in the center. Yes, your king side is unsafe, but because they have no way to attack you, it doesn't matter at all. They have no way to attack you, so what's the point of it being unsafe? You're going to continue with a gigantic attack on the king side. You can then go queen g6, probably move your king over and move this rook to g1 to get a big battery on the g file. You'll continue moving your knight in, probably f4 here to open up this bishop. This bishop is a monster on these diagonals, and all your pieces are actually perfectly placed to go on a gigantic attack. So that is why, in general, pawn to d5 here, while it can be good in some positions, here after bishop e2, the orthodox is not good, but they have one more big variation here, that being capturing your pawn on e5. This is going to go into probably an endgame, which can actually get surprisingly dangerous. You want to know what you are doing very well, but it's also very dangerous for white. First off, you're going to capture back here. White is going to take your queen. Any other move is just stupid. So they take. You'll take it back with your rook. And from here, bishop g5 is the best move to pin like this. However, it might seem, isn't this just a free pawn? Aha, not quite, because you have that same strike we have seen in a couple of these positions. Knight takes on e4. You open up against their knight while capturing the pawn on e4. If they take here, you simply take back. You're doing very, very well here. And if instead, if instead back here, they try to, what else can they try? They can try to take an f7. Desperado, attack your rook, try to get some material. You have a nice way to play here. The only threat is that after captures, they would take your knight. So you simply trade, capture the knight check, and after takes, you are up a piece. So that try does not work at all. Back here, they can also try knight to d5, but actually I'll take a look at that after. Bishop g5 here is their main move, pinning our knight to our rook. And you have a couple ways to play here. I have found the best way to go is knight b to d7. which looks odd because you block in your bishop and your rook. However, defending your knight and your pawn is both very important. White can now long castle, and this is a threat. They can now actually try to capture on e5 here because the knight would be under attack, and we cannot capture back because of the pin. But here you have a very just interesting move. This is definitely an engine move, rook to f8. I don't think any human would play this, but the reasoning behind it actually makes complete sense. Simply put, you're moving out of the way of this pin, and e8 does look like what would be the best move. However, the problem is after knight to d5, c7 would be hanging, and in that case, it would actually be a fork of two of our rooks, and because of that, that would probably be simply a losing position, but here it's not, so you can simply play pawn to c6 here. Just go ahead and attack their knight. If they play c7, then simply rook to b8, and they have now gotten their knight completely trapped in our position. They're probably still fine here, but you are definitely better. And so because of that, their better move here is knight e7 check, and after king to h8, they trade here. You capture back with your rook, and this, although it looks not super great, is actually a very good endgame for you because you're attacking their pawn in e4 here, so knight to d2 is basically required to keep that defended, and now knight to c5, and you're actually moving into their position. e4 is now attacked here. They don't want to trade and get rid of their only thing that's keeping this bishop from being an absolute monster, so f3 here is probably required to try and keep the defense, but now knight comes in to e6, or I guess drops back to e6, but the idea is after their bishop backs up, you can now go c5, and your knight is going to drop into d4. It's a very meticulous rotation. Your knight went from d7 or b8 to d7 to c5 to e6, and is going to go to d4 at the end of the day. However, d4 is incredibly strong, puts a giant hold on everything their position is like going for, and you're going to be doing very great in those lines. They do have some other things they can try. Back here, a lot of people will play knight to d5 immediately. This is a lot weaker though, because you can play c6, that same move, attack their knight. If they play knight to e7 check here, then after king to f8, we get this trade, and from here, you can take back with your c rook or your d rook, because if you take the d rook, then you get it out of the pin here. This is simply a good position for you. You have all the same ideas, knight to c5 and such, but simply better because it's like your tempo up. If we go back here, they can also try to trade your knight like so, but you're simply going to take back with your own knight, and after knight takes on e5 here, taking the pawn on e5 is almost always bad for them, and here is no different. You have a very nice rook to e8, attacking their knight, and the pawn behind it. They're going to lose material, and basically all their tries lose here. If they go f4, trying to defend the knight, then knight takes e4, and they're going to end up losing a piece, or at least a ton of pawns, because we attack their bishop, and if they back it up, then we have g5 here, attacking their bishop, and they cannot capture because then this is a free knight, and after they back up again, you can now capture, and it's just complete brutality for them, or brutality for us. They are getting completely just massacred here. Positions are opening up, and they are just completely dying. And they can also try instead trading an f6 with their bishop instead, but it doesn't work. Capture, once again, f4, but it doesn't work. You can simply go ahead and trade here. This pawn is going to be lost very soon. Bishop f3, bishop f5. Take advantage of the pin. They're going to lose the pawn. You're going to have a better position. Also, one more move here. I know there's a lot of things, but one more move. If they try backing up the d3, simply takes an e4. The pin is just completely murderous, and they're going to die a hopefully gruesome death. And because of that, you're going to be doing very well in basically all of these lines. One more thing, back here, when we capture their queen, instead of bishop g5, they can try knight to d5. And here you have a very fun move. It looks odd, but it's the best move here. Rook to d7 just moving your rook up a little bit, you control or really defend c7, and it might look like a blunder because they can take on e5 here, and now our rook is attacked, but simply knight takes on d5, and after knight takes, knight to b4 here, you already win like 70% of games going for this fork on their king and their rook. Captures, check, king moves over, you capture their rook, and although your knight is stuck, their knight is stuck as well. You potentially can get it out, but in reality, you're probably going to be able to move your bishop out, move your rook out, and just get a much more active game, even though at the end of the day, you might be down a pawn. Alright, so those were all the orthodox variations of bishop e2. Let's take a look in this position, f3. This is the Samisch variation, defending the e4 pawn with the f3 pawn, and the idea here is they're likely going to try and go bishop e3, queen d2, long castle, and go on a big attack on us, and that is not what we want, and so as a result, we are not going to let that happen. In the usual fashion, we are going to simply go ahead and castle here, bishop e3, and you're going to play c5. This is the Samisch Gambit and is by far the best way to play against the Samisch. The good thing here is that in the Samisch, the reason most people play it is that the most common move here, e5, is bad because white can go d5 here, shutting down the center, and this is very good for them. But when we play c5 here, that same most common move of d5 is now suddenly not good. Let me show you exactly why in this case it's actually pretty bad. The reasoning is we can go pawn to e6 here, and we're going to capture them, start opening up the position, and they can't really stop us. Most people will probably try to go queen d2, try to just go in that same fashion, bishop h6, all that action, and here you're going to trade. Taking back the c-pawn is best, and you'll notice here we get a Benoni structure, which if you like the Benoni, which I personally do, this is going to be more powerful for you. You can go ahead and check out my quick guide on Benoni if you want to learn more about it, but in general, these positions are going to be very good for you. They can take with the e-pawn, but then rook e8, and this is definitely not what they want. Now h6 is a lot more difficult to do. Capture c-pawn is better. And from here, you actually have some pretty typical Benoni moves. Pawn to a6 here, controlling b5. If they simply long castle here, letting us play b5 is just complete death. Controlling this much queenside space, especially when they've castled there, is just not something they can let us do. We can then go queen a5, b4, and likely start a gigantic attack against them. So instead here, a4 is the best move to prevent that. One try though, if they go bishop h6 immediately, this is not very good. Why? Because of that same move we saw a couple times now, knight takes e4. Attacking their queen and their knight. This case, it's a little different, but it's the same idea. After knight takes back, we can go queen to h4 here. The reason we sacrifice to open up this pathway for our queen, and we fork their king and their bishop. g3, we capture. It's a little bit more complicated than what I'm showing here, but you're going to be definitely winning in all those variations, so it's still good for you. So a4, best move, prevent b5, and from here, you want to go queen to a5, basically saying, nah, I want to go b5 anyways, because if they just go like bishop d3 here, you can go b5 because they can't capture because you have this pin here. If they capture, that's a free rook, and you laugh at them as they cry, and you don't have any mercy for them. You start punching them as well. Instead, knight g to e2 is a better try to just try and keep everything defended, but you can see how just tight their position is. Like, all their pieces are really condensed and just tripping over each other in this kind of weird mass over here. But you're doing well. You have all the space in the world. Knight b to d7. You can rotate your knight to the center square e5. Once again, a typical Benoni thing. They castle. We can go b4 here. Attack their knight. They back up. Knight e5. And you sing Kumbaya, you're just doing very, very well here. Great game. Instead, they can try rook to a3. Once again, preventing b5 because it doesn't work now. The rook is defended. So instead here, same moves. Knight b to d7. You're going to rotate your knight to that central square in e5. They have no way to stop this plan, which is why it's so strong, and e5 is such a good outpost for us. Their best move here is knight to f2, trying to potentially rotate their knight and get something traded or of the like, but it's still not very good for them. We can go knight to h5. And the same typical idea, f5 in the King's Indian, sticks around here. f5, you can probably go on a big king side attack. Even though your queen is over here in the meantime, it's basically single-handedly beasting like 5 different pieces. And so as a result, you're doing very, very well in all of these variations. And why d5 in general is just not very good, because you essentially just get a improved Benoni. But they do have more challenging options in response to c5 here that will actually get them a pretty good game that you do have to know what to do against. First off, what if they try to trade here on c5? Well, this is the Samisch Gambit accepted, and here this is going to go once again into an endgame line. If you saw the Orthodox endgame, it has a lot of the same ideas, but it definitely is different. After captures, you're going to go ahead, recapture right back. Once again, we get that trade. Queen takes, rook takes back, and now bishop takes on c5 here. The best way to play is to go, first off, knight to c6, defending the pawn like this, and their biggest weakness here is going to be their c4 pawn. And you're going to play various moves to go ahead and attack that. First off, they play rook to d1 here. Their most common move, you're going to go ahead and trade here. Captures back with their king. They can take with a knight, but the position is basically the same. And from here, the typical rotation you need to know is knight to d7. Very, very important move because it does two things. It opens up this diagonal for your bishop to both go ahead and attack their knight and also just open up this entire diagonal. And also, this knight is probably going to go in rotation somewhere over here, either to e5 or possibly to b6 or some other square. Most people are going to back up to e3 here, at which point you can go ahead and capture. Usually trading the bishop like this is a terrible move, but here it's completely fine because your bishop didn't really have too many more prospects, and now they have doubled isolated c-pawns. And the way you're going to attack here is you're going to go pawn to b6, and you're going to launch this knight out to a5. This bishop can go out to a6. This rook can go out to c8 and add even more pressure, potentially knight e5 as well. And you can see how all of your pieces are going to be completely dominating that pawn, probably also the pawn behind it too, because that is also super weak. And because you have a target here, and white really has no target, their plan is basically just move their knight out, castle, and then just hope for the best, or not castle, but basically just hope for the best. You're going to be doing smooth sailing, awesome in so many of those positions. They do have other options. Here, if they try knight g to e2 instead of rook to d1, the plan doesn't really change. And if they don't move their bishop right away, you have many ways to play here, but my favorite is to go the immediate b6. And after they back their bishop up, then go a3 or e3 here. A3 is the better square, at which point bishop a6, and it's all the same ideas, knight a5, this rook like that. The same rotation of knight to d7 and knight to e5 is also very good. Yeah, very, very good there. They can also try bishop e3. But in this case, this is just a plain out bad move because knight to b4, and your knight is going to get in with a very good check one way or another, and they're just going to be suffering in so many of those positions there. They can also try, let's look at knight to d5 here, launching the right into the center, and this is probably their strongest try here because this does get in the way of a rook, which is very annoying. But simply here, the same rotation, knight to d7 works wonders here. You sacrifice a second pawn, but in reality, it's kind of like a pseudo-sacrifice because you're probably going to win the pawn back in most of these variations because b2 is completely hanging here. First off, they take with the bishop. You can simply capture with check, king to f8, knight is going to back up to d5, and then bishop takes on b2. You're just doing well here. After you move the rook over, you can just go ahead and back your bishop up, either to g7, or if you're a little freaky, you can always go to a3 if you're into that kind of stuff. Or else, from here, you can just start rotating your pieces out. Knight to c5, bishop b6, probably b6 again is also a good idea. You're doing very, very well here, not too much to say. They can also try knight takes an e7 check, which is probably a little bit better, but similar ideas after capture, capture. And here, when faced with this, you do not want to just slide your rook over, because they can drop their bishop back, and they're actually defending against all odds. They are somehow defending, so simply bishop takes b2 first, and if they try to capture, at the end of the day, this is just good for you. Knight e2 here. You can rotate your knight out, knight to e5, bishop e6, a lot of the same ideas, and you're just doing very, very well here. Your bishop it's in a little bit of danger of getting trapped, but in reality, they have no way of actually attacking it, so you should just be completely fine here. Alright, so that's how to play that Samisch Gambit, which is very important endgame line. They do have one other thing they can try here, which is back in this position, actually a little bit further back to right here. Instead of capturing and pushing up, they can also try to ignore with like knight g to e2 here, but it doesn't work out very well. You have a couple of good ways to play. My favorite is to lob your queen out to a5, get this very nice pin here, and you actually have similar ideas. In the other line, you're probably going to go a6 and b5. If they try queen to d2 here, you can very easily go knight to c6, and then a6, b5 here, go on a big attack on the queen side. The only worry for us might be knight d5, forcing some trade of the queens can get bad, so simply go e6 here, prevent that. You're always going to be doing very, very well. And if they try d5 here, you have a super fun way of playing. Do not let them get stagnant and, just boring positions. b5, strike out, attack. The idea being after captures an a6, we kind of get a wing gambit, but definitely a very good one, because this bishop's is a just complete monster. This queen's a monster. You're going to move your knight out. You have a just ton of fun attacks on the queen side, and if they ever move their knight, you can always go ahead and trade here, or even just ignore it and just keep moving your knight out, because if they try trading, then you can go ahead and capture back for the queen. Castling is prevented, and you still have complete domination of the king side. Alright, so that is the Samisch Variation. Very, very big one. Let's go back here. f4, let's take a look at this next. This is the 4 pawns attack, which is, as you can see, 4 pawns. It's completely ginormous, and while it can get dangerous, honestly, this line is not as good as it looks like at first glance. Here, once again, castle, that idea does not change at all, and there are some branches here, but your position doesn't change too much. Knight to f3 is what most people play. Very typical move, just developing their knight, keeping central control. They can try e5 here, which wasn't good in the other line, but here, because now defend of the f-pawn is a bit better. However, honestly, it's actually still not that great. How to beat this? You capture, they take back the f-pawn, and you now back your knight up to d7. Looks odd, but the idea is we have a ton of pressure on e5, and we'll then play c5 here, at which point this is actually really bad for them. If they try capturing, well, this is terrible. You take this, you're just completely dominating here. Their pawn structure sucks. If they go d5, you can take on e5. You're just up a pawn here. If they go bishop e3 and try to defend, you can capture, bishop takes back, and then knight to c6, and this is a disaster for them. And lastly, if they try bishop f4, then you can capture. They have to take back, probably for their queen, to try and keep the defense, but then knight to c6. Once again, complete disaster. So that's just to show e5 still does not work very well. It is slightly better, I guess, but still doesn't work very well. Knight to f3 is the better move, just keeping on developing. And we now have the same strike we've seen in a lot of these positions. Pawn c5 here, attacking them in the center. If they try capturing here, normally you would capture back and go to an endgame, but here you actually have another option, which is better, that being knight to a6. It looks odd because they can just capture again. Aren't we just losing a pawn here? But after we take back, looks very awkward, but the idea is we're going to go knight to c5 here, rook to e8, and their pawn on e4 is extremely weak, and they're going to be completely suffering to even try to defend it. For example, bishop d3 here. You can also go queen b6, preventing them from castling, which is even more brutal. And after like queen e2 here, knight to c5, their bishop will probably back up to c2, and rook d8. They are in a lot of trouble. Also, because we have this pin, you can potentially go bishop to f5 here, which can also get really, really bad for them for another line of attack. And so capturing is not very good. They can also try here, pawn to d5, which is probably their best try instead. And you're now going to go e6. Very similar as we've seen in the Samisch, but it is a bit different here because the pawn's on f4 instead. But we are attacking their pawn in the center. What can they try? Let's take a look at the most common option first, that being bishop to e2 here. And white has to be very careful. You're going to capture, and if they take up the e-pawn, then this is just playing out a good position for us. We can go bishop to f5. And after they castle, knight launches into e4, and you can see our positions. This is like art. Our positions are just opening up and completely, like, all our pieces are dominating, and everything just works in harmony and wonders. Their best tries to capture, and bishop d3, get rid of our good bishop. But after takes and takes, we can go knight to d7 here. And I mean, we're still doing super well. We're going to keep getting our knight out. This diagonal is just completely unparalleled in terms of our control, and we're completely dominating there. If they take with the c-pawn, oh, would you look at that? We get the Benoni structure again, and once again, it's very good. And we have the typical Benoni move here, bishop to g4. In this case, it definitely is a little bit different than normal. Because the f4 pawn, our knight going to d7 and to e5 is rotation that we cannot do right now. However, we have a lot of these same ideas. After white castles, we can go knight b to d7. White will likely try h3 here. We can go ahead and trade. Just one fun line I have for you. And when you cannot play your f pawn up like in this position, but you want to, simply back your knight up. E8, there's no shame in it. Just go f5, then bring your knight right back, or you can even keep it here in a lot of variations. Let's look at rook to e1. In this case, you can rotate your knight to c7. And this actually had two ideas because now b5 is threatened. Once again, in these Benoni positions, if they let us go b5, we're going to happily, because now, like, our space on the queen side is just completely dominating. So a4 is the best move to try and prevent. And from here, you can go a6, going for this once again. If they try a5 here to prevent us from going like this via en passant, then simply knight to b5. And after captures, you get that same space. Even though it's a little, your structure's messed up a little bit, it's completely fine. Your structure is still good enough, and you have the space more than makes up for it. Their best move here is bishop e3, at which point you do have to be a bit careful. Their main source of counterplay in these positions is to go e5 and start breaking away at d6, which can get very bad, which is the reason we're kind of doing this odd rotation to play b5 instead of just directly trying to do it. But here we can still go b5. In this case, e5 is now not a very good threat because the rook is blocked out from seeing the pawn. And after it captures, knight takes back, knight takes, captures. At the end of the day, this is just a good position. Your bishop is a monster. Your queen is a monster. Your knight is not doing too much back here, but he's good in the meantime. And eventually you can play queen b7 here, or potentially move your rook over to gain even better control of the queen side. And you were doing awesome in this position. Now let's head back here. Instead of playing bishop e2, they do have some other options. If they try capturing here, you want to take back with the f-pawn, and although it looks very odd, this is just good for you because you can go knight h5, and you have all the same like typical attacking ideas, but it's just better because you have the open f-file. For example, let's say they go bishop d3 here. You can go knight to c6. Knight d4 is also a power spot after like they castle here. you can go knight d4. Although your structure is slightly messed up, it doesn't really matter because you can go e5 here and just keep everything defended. Captures, captures. You have a complete domination of the center. This rotation will likely happen, potentially moving to f4 in the future if you can. Your bishop will move out, maybe here, maybe to g4 to pin their knight to their queen. You're doing good. They can also try, last thing here, bishop d3 first instead of capturing first or whatever, and you have same ideas as before. After captures, if they take back the e-pawn, then rook to e8 with a nice check, and you're just doing very well. If they take back with the d-pawn, we get the Benoni again, and you have a very fun Benoni move. You don't need to know this, but this is just a fun bonus. You can play very nice b5 here. Looks crazy, but you can just go ahead, take that queenside space. If they ignore you, you're going to go c4, b4, and like you're just completely dominating here. If they try capturing with their knight, then rook to e8, attacking e4, and after knight drops back to c3 defending, you have knight takes back, and f5. And this is actually very, very tricky for them to navigate around and defend properly. And lastly, if they take with the bishop, then simply knight takes c4 here, capture, and then queen to a5 check. And yeah, you're just winning here. Bishop d2, queen takes back, and winning's a strong word, but you're definitely better. They cannot castle now. Your bishop is a monster, and you have very good development. d6 is a weakness, but after they capture here, you take on b2, and you're just doing completely fine here. Their knight doesn't really attack anything. It's not defended. You're doing very, very well. Now, they do have two other good lines here, those being the Averbakh variations, where here, instead of playing knight to f3 right away, they go bishop to e2 first. Once again, we castle. Does not change on that front. But here, white now goes bishop to e3 or bishop g5. Bishop g5 is the normal Averbakh, and then bishop e3 is the Semi-Averbakh. Bishop e3 I think is slightly better. I'll take a look at bishop g5 first. You have the same idea as in allies positions. Pawn to c5 is the best move here. If they capture, then it's just not very good. You can go ahead and just capture back, and this endgame is going to favor you. d5 is your most common try here, at which point you can go e6, and it's very typical, as we've seen a lot. The reason this pin is troublesome is that the typical move of f5 here is harder to play, but in this scenario we don't actually want to play it, so it doesn't really make that big of a difference here. Queen d2 is your most common try, probably trying to go h6 here and trade off if they can. We can go ahead and just capture. They will take it back with their e-pawn. If they take with the c-pawn, this is Benoni once again, a6, b5, you know the ideas. If they take back with the e-pawn, then you have a very nice way to play here. Queen to b6, putting pressure on b2, which doesn't look that important, but the idea is if they try bishop h6, it doesn't work, because then that is a free pawn. Plus you get this, so big problems for them. Instead, knight to f3 is their best move, just keeping on, developing from here. And your position is pretty simple. You can go bishop to f5 here, launch your knight into the center on e4, which is very good. Just, once again, we get kind of this thing we saw in the other position, where all our pieces are opening up. This is like a Mona Lisa of chess positions. After captures, you start moving your pieces in, and you're doing awesome. Not really too much to say. The other line here, bishop e3 is the Semi-Averbakh, and you want to go c5 here. Very similar to the Samisch with that c5 move. If they capture here, then you don't want to capture back right away. You want to play queen to a5 here. Attacking c5, pinning their knight to their king. So now there's various ideas of playing knight takes on e4, which can get really, really, really deadly. So because of that, their best move here is f3. If they try capturing, then knight takes on e4, and yeah, it's just completely murderous. If they go queen d2, trying to get this and unpin, you can just capture back. No rocket science. Just move your pieces out, go rook to d8, and attack their queen. You're doing great there. f3 is their best try, defending e4 like so. And from here, you can just go ahead and capture back. And there's a couple ways this can go. Also, one example line, probably the most challenging one, is e5. attacking our knight, and we can't actually quite move it back right away because then f4, and this is actually quite bad for us. So instead, rook to d8 first, attacking their queen, and you have the line here, queen to a4, going for a queen trade, capture, capture, and now this. And the difference is after f4 here, we can go knight to c6, and their knight is very awkward on the side of the board. And although your pieces do look a little tight, you want to go b6 here, put your bishop on this diagonal to combat this, and it's very hard to say you have anywhere near a bad position. This knight will also probably rotate somewhere maybe to f8 and then to e6 into d4 to team up with the other knight. That's probably the rotation we'll go to, and you have a very, very good way of playing here. And because of this key move here, c5, the Averbachs aren't actually very strong. Most people let white go like queen d2 and start launching this big attack. c5, and they have nothing. Alright, well thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe for more. Become a member to support me and vote on future opening videos. And speaking of members, my 4 members I have here are I Just Rizzed You Up Productions, Fesmeros Herkes of Versilia, Kalul Delem, and Hashirama. Thank you to my members. I also have the PGN for all these moves in the description if you want to study it yourself. Yeah, have a great day. I will see you next time.